Hello, I'm Matt Williamson, and I wanted to sneak a quick video in here before I get back to my band histories, and this one is on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I've always kind of approached the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a corporation that's cute at best, and at worst, utterly irrelevant. And they've got a little bad press lately with the Dolly Parton stuff, and clearly they are running out of rockers to put in this so-called hall. And as we've seen them adding country stars and rap stars, and even adding in a Lifetime Achievement Award for Jan Wenner. So, I mean, if that doesn't just say it all. I like Peter Doggett's description of being inducted into the Hall of Fame as not so much an honor, but an excuse for hip millionaires to don tuxedos and celebrate their own success. So this has been this ultra fraternity, this club that none of us are in. Obviously, they don't even hold the ceremonies in the city that the Hall of Fame was built in, and we'll get to that in a moment. But generally speaking, I think the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has outlived its usefulness and only really makes sense in the 20th century. Now it's just trying to add anything in and trying to be popular, artists that don't even play rock and roll. And in the first 10 years or so, it seemed to make some sense. They really went after the proper people, the very early rock and roll people, and through the 60s and 70s. That all made a lot of sense. And then the petty politics started coming in, first with the Mamas and the Papas. They were snubbing them a bit, and this supposedly was a feud. It was a San Francisco versus Los Angeles feud that went back to the Monterey Pop Festival, and the Mamas and Papas had to guilt them to let them in. More blatant was the snubbing of Kiss. Now, Kiss was eligible to be inducted in 1994, and they had to wait 15 years. Now, if ever there was a band that probably should be in there, it's Kiss. I mean, after their contribution, what they did for rock music, making it more of a spectacle, they sold a lot of records. People loved the rock music, and yet they weren't in. Why is that? Well, because the people that run the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the muckety-mucks there, they don't like Kiss. Kiss is not cool. Kiss is not an elite band. They don't have Kiss albums in the record collection. We're going to make them wait. And when they did get in, they didn't even allow in all the members to be inducted. Whereas with the Grateful Dead, all the iterations of that band, all those people are inducted. That's what you call a San Francisco bias. So all this stuff, it goes on. There was supposedly an overriding of allowing the Monkees in. And then finally, probably one of the more blatant snubs was the Paul McCartney snub, not letting him in the year after John Lennon, which is a deal that was made between him and Jan Wenner. So in the meantime, you've got all these other performers that are in the Rock and Roll Hall, such as Madonna and Joan Baez, Donna Summer, Nat King Cole, Leonard Cohen, Jay-Z. So a lot of people do not consider this rock music. So why are they in? It's because they're popular. So a lot of the people I just mentioned are already in some kind of Hall of Fame. And we just had Dolly Parton pull out of the nominations, or try to pull out. A frustrated Jan Wenner cannot be reached for comment. But there's many halls already available. And there is a Hip Hop Hall of Fame, for instance, founded in 1992. There's a Country Music Hall of Fame, Vocal Hall of Fame, Musicians Hall of Fame in Nashville, Blues Hall of Fame in Memphis, the UK Music Hall of Fame, Big Band and Jazz Hall of Fame, Rockabilly Hall of Fame in Nashville, Hawaiian Music Hall of Fame, Irish Music Hall of Fame, Latin Grammy Hall of Fame, Songwriters Hall of Fame, and Polka Hall of Fame. Now, I just took the highlights from a very long list of probably 75 halls. So does the Rock Hall of Fame just need to cherry pick the popular people out of these other halls just to stuff the ballot box and make themselves more popular? Apparently so. As I prepared for this video, I came across an article from 2020 by Delany Davis. And the title of this article is called Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Has a Representation Problem. Now you can see where this is going. This is one of the problems that the hall is facing. So she goes into talk about how they make their selections and says this: while this nominating process may seem efficient, it has allowed gender and race disparities to run rampant in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So she lists some statistics here. Only 69 out of the 888 are women. only 32% are people of color, 64.3% are inductees of white men. Instead of honoring rock and roll, a majority white Rock and Roll Hall of Fame disrespects the genre's origin. Now, I'd like to challenge that. If you look at the very first year of nominations, if she's going to talk about the majority white Rock and Roll Hall of Fame disrespects the genre's origins, let's just look at the origins of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for a moment, shall we? So here are the performers that were inducted that first year in 1986. We have Chuck Berry, James Brown, Ray Charles, Sam Cooke, Fats Domino, Little Richard. So those are the first six. Do you see any similarity, anything that they have in common there? It ain't their shoe size, all right? So the next four are Everly Brothers, Buddy Holly, Jerry Lee Lewis, Elvis. So 6 out of the 10 are black. Now, we have another category called early influencers. And we have 3 people here that were inducted: Jimmy Rogers, Jimmy Yancey, and Robert Johnson. Now, 2 of those 3 are black. Finally, we have the non-performers, Ahmet Ertegun Award. We have Alan Freed, Sam Phillips, and John Hammond. Now, these are 3 white guys. However, if you read any of their biographies or any of their bios, what you're going to see near the top is this kind of stuff. So with Alan Freed, he had a role in breaking down racial barriers in U.S. pop culture in the 1950s by leading white and black kids to listen to the same music. Sam Phillips, record producer, founder of Sun Records, advocate for racial equality, helping to break down racial barriers in the music industry. John Hammond, producer, civil rights activist. He played a critical role in integrating the music industry. He discovered Elvis. He called Elvis the Negro sound and the Negro feel. So the people that in this non-performers award, I mean, they're very much a part of integrating music and just society, really, through music. And I think the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame actually got that right. That's one thing you don't have to rip on the Hall of Fame for. So let's read one other thing I want to mention, too. I did a quick breakdown, just a quick demographic search. She talks about 32% of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame are people of color. Well, if you look at if you add up all the minorities in the United States, of which where the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is located, it's about 36% people of color combined. So this 32.7% is really pretty close to what the breakdown of the country's demographics are anyway. So let's see what else she has to say here. I thought this was rather humorous. She goes on to say that there are several artists not in the Rock Hall that many would regard to be the best musicians that have ever lived. One such artist is Cyndi Lauper, whose hits Girls Just Want to Have Fun and Time After Time are notable rock staples. All due respect to Cyndi Lauper, who I really like. Fine singer, fine actress, actually. You know, is she considered one of the great, best musicians that have ever lived? I mean, this is what passes for rock journalism these days. Thankfully, we have some balance. We have some other journalists that are actually quite good. Now, the reason I wanted to do this video is because I found an old article from 2013 by Nick Gillespie. Now, if that name is familiar to you, he's an American Libertarian journalist. So he has a go at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame here. He talked about the pyramid-shaped museum has been inducting, entombing might be a better word, honorees since 1986. He goes on to say, as a libertarian, I'm opposed to using tax dollars to fund non-essential functions of government, a category that surely describes rock music. Yet taxpayer dollars help to build the hall, which just ain't right. If rock and roll is doing its job, it should be an enemy of the state, not the recipient of its largesse. Now, Gillespie wrote this in 2013, and I had made a copy of it, and I had stashed it in my notes, and I just come across it recently. I'm like, oh, let's bring this out again. Good old Nick. And since we have the Rock Hall inductions coming up next month, I thought it would be appropriate to revisit this article. I'll leave a link below so you can read the whole thing. He goes on, he rips on the fact that it's in Cleveland and they don't have the inductions there, and that the taxpayers got this bill of goods sold to them to the tune of $65 million. And every year they have to pay 15% of the operating costs of the place. He says, if rock shouldn't be supported by the state, it also doesn't need anything like an official Hall of Fame. And he has a little go here at the baby boomers, of which he is one. He says, and yet it's the baby boomers, especially Hall of Fame and Rolling Stones mag founder Jan Wenner, arguably the archetypal example of 60s style pseudo-rebellion against the status quo, who felt a need to create the ultimate arbiter of establishment value. Who knew that all those freak flags being flown back in the day were really surrender flags, and that rock stars were just as desperate to be certified as Hall of Famers as football players and professional bowlers? Thank you, Nick Gillespie. Steve Bry is a little more direct. He wrote something in The Guardian. This is 2016. He suggested just burning it to the ground. But one thing that I thought was interesting is he went into more details of the Paul McCartney snubbing. And the background on that is he quotes Joe Hagan's biography, Sticky Fingers, which is a biography on Jan Wenner. And Wenner worked with Hagan on this for a while, but they had a parting of ways. And Hagan describes that snubbing of McCartney thusly. Wenner told him that if he agreed to induct Lennon, the Hall of Fame would induct McCartney the following year. And so McCartney inducted John Lennon in 1994. But Wenner's promise was a lie. The next year, McCartney discovered that he was not, in fact, being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Quote, I rang Jan and said, I'm getting all the papers and I don't appear to be on it, you fucking bastard, said McCartney. We had a deal. Wenner said he didn't remember making such a deal. So Wenner, in fact, made McCartney wait 4 years instead of doing it the next year as discussed. And by that time, Linda McCartney had passed away, and it was too late for her to see her husband inducted, unfortunately. But I still don't understand why McCartney would deal with this guy. I mean, you're going to try to make a deal with the devil, you're going to get burned. And I think it shows you how badly McCartney wants to be in the establishment, the rock establishment. So that's what you get. So anyway, I thought you might get a kick out of this. These articles I've referred to, I'll leave links below. But I just want to close this up with a quote from Todd Rundgren, who says, if the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was really just about rock and roll, it would be done inducting members. Thanks, Todd.